Hello, everybody that's joining, and welcome to the webinar. We'll get started in just a little bit. Really glad you're here. Nice to see so many friends that are joining and colleagues from all over. Welcome, welcome. And Kristen just put a question in the chat, so I encourage you all to look at the chat and also add where you're coming from, where your name, your organization, and where you're zooming in from. Brock from Boston. Hey, Brock. Hurricane Island, Chuck Lennox, good to see you. Lexington, Kentucky is here. Wow. All over, Maine, Washington, Ohio. Welcome everybody. We'll get started in just a little bit. Want to wait for everybody to join. We still have a few minutes. And I like, Kristen, that you say stay strong. I say stay well, or, you know, tough times.
Yeah. I have been thinking about starting an Etsy account and bringing back days of the week underwear, because I think it's something we can all use. I frequently find myself being like, what day is it?
I know. They kind of Groundhog's Day every day. What day is it? Hello, everybody. We'll get started in just a little bit. Oregon and North Carolina. So many others. Welcome, welcome. Have another minute. And please go ahead and say where you're from, how you sign your letters these days, your emails.
You know, pants are up to you. It's entirely a personal call these days. Pants, no pants.
Even though we can't see you, we can tell.
That's right. I'm sure Zoom actually can tell. You know, I think we should all be paying closer attention to what this technology is keeping track about us.
Uh-oh, don't say that. Okay, everyone, welcome to today's webinar. We're so happy you could join us. My name is Judy Browse. I'm the Executive Director of the North American Association for Environmental Education, and really thrilled that you could be here today for a webinar about communication and how do we communicate in these historic times. And as many of us have talked about, what is that new normal going to look like? And it's not a normal. Hopefully we're building back better and stronger. And Kristen's going to talk a lot about how do we communicate now that will set us up for the future. And we couldn't have a better person. And I'll introduce Kristen in just a second. Just a few housekeeping. For those of you who have been on our webinars before, you know that we hold usually monthly webinars, but during this crisis, we've been doing more frequent webinars and have a number of them lined up. And it's trying to bring new ideas and insights about actually how do we deal with the crisis that we're in, but also, as I mentioned, how do we think about the future? And I also want to thank all our affiliate co-hosts who are helping to spread the word about our webinar series and also take part in a lot of what we're doing. So thank you. And if you're not sure who your state affiliate is, you can check with us, but great organizations to get involved with wherever you live. And I know everybody uses different platforms. So just again, how to communicate is through the chat. You can either send a message to all of us panelists, including Kristen and Anne and me and Jenna, or you can send it to everyone. And all you need to do is use the drop down. Everybody is muted because we have so many online so that there's not interference. You can always ask questions and put resources into the chat room. That is fantastic. If you will do that, you'll get a copy of the chat, you'll get a copy of the recording, and you'll get a copy of the PowerPoint after this presentation. And we are doing live captioning for anyone that is having trouble with audio, and that will come out again in the recording. And I also want to thank Jenna, who is doing our live captioning. So thank you, Jenna, for doing that. And I also want to thank Anne Umali, who is helping to manage our webinar series. She's the director of our professional development work and the manager of EE360. And Anne will be closing up the webinar at the end, but Anne, thank you for all you do and helping to monitor the questions. And now it just gives me such great pleasure to introduce Kristen, my good friend and colleague, and one of the best strategic communicators on the planet. Kristen has been a long-term friend of NAAE in the field of environmental education and has been a keynote speaker, has done a number of webinars for us, including one at the very beginning of the pandemic, and has been fantastic. And as you can see, she has done a lot in her lifetime in terms of helping others with strategic communications and trying to help create lasting social change. She's helped hundreds of nonprofits, corporations, foundations, government agencies, all trying to help make the world a better place. And she's really been involved with some of the most pressing issues of our day, including a number of the environmental issues like the Gulf oil spill and this pandemic. And she's been thinking about this a lot. I encourage you to look at spitfirestrategies.com to see all the things that they have produced. And you'll see that Kristen is a really fast thinker, brilliant and funny, and really important at this time to learn how do we do better on communication. So Kristen, thank you so much. We're going to turn this over to you. And I can't thank you enough for being here. And by the way, we circulated an article that Kristen just did, and we'll put it in the chat so you can read this as well, because it's really a thoughtful piece that can help all of us. So Kristen, thank you.
Of course. I'm delighted to be with you all. I think if you're sort of wondering, you know, it feels like everybody's telling us to communicate right now. And some people are like, you need to communicate more. Other people are like, don't communicate, listen. Some people are like, step up. And then other people are like, don't step in it. And pretty soon you're sort of, what am I supposed to be doing? So if you're sort of like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be doing, then join the crowd. Me either. This is my first pandemic and massive, you know, racial justice watershed moment. So I feel similarly. But what I thought I would do is give you a little bit of how I'm thinking about this and some contextual points that I think might help you, and you'll have to apply it to your own work, show you some examples. And then I'll just open it up and we can talk about, you know, the communication challenges you're facing, the opportunities you want to take advantage of, and just have an opportunity to workshop what's going on in your mind. So it might raise something for you today. It might be that you already came here today with a problem you'd like to talk through, and we'll save some time for that. So let's get started on the next slide. For anybody that's been living under a rock, let me tell you where we've been. So we've got a couple of things going on here. We've got a strong, sustained push for racial justice and dismantling white supremacy. Unprecedented, really, for many of us in our lifetimes. And so this is big, and it is taking a lot of what we need to be focused on and attention, and we need to think about what it means for our work. It connects to everybody's work, and so trying to decide what it means is important. Secondly, obviously, we have the global pandemic going on. It continues, spikes are happening. You know, it really changes how we think about everything from planning and how we think about planning to science and what we think about science and experts. and even globalization. So it drives a lot of conversations right now. We obviously have a lot of economic upheaval from all of this. Yes, and as somebody's saying in the chat, and by the way, you can put climate change on there. So climate change still going on, did not take a hiatus during all of this. And possibly most importantly as well, Mercury is in retrograde, I checked. So yes, it is in retrograde, which means that basically we cannot communicate well during this time. So it does not turn back here for a little bit. So we've got a lot going on as a world, and that means that this is context that everybody's operating in. So when you're going to talk to your audiences, all of this is going on. And so I tried to think about, so what does that mean for us? So let's take a look at the next slide as we think about communications. And this is really the difference, I will tell you. So as you think about climate change and we think about public opinion and the slow crawl we've had on public opinion in the United States around climate, which is trending in the right direction, but inch by inch, we're seeing a completely different thing here around racial justice and equity. So this is literally just 2016. You can see that the public support for Black Lives Matter was quite low. It is now spiked. And these are the types of things that won't necessarily slide back. So what we see right now in public opinion because of the economic upheaval around the pandemic, for example, you know, anytime the economy's doing well, we tend to be able to have more serious conversations about the environment. The environment seems more important to people, and predictably, and it is happening now, that if jobs, healthcare, the economy rise in concern, then the environment falls. And so, you know, you're seeing though at the same time, because the concern about climate change has steadily climbed up, you are seeing that that's not going to go back. It's not like suddenly people aren't going to be so concerned about it. They might have other front burner issues, but they're still also concerned about climate. And so as they consider about the pandemic, as they consider about, are we set up for another crisis that we could avoid? These are different conversations that you can have today that you couldn't have before. So right now, you know, we're basically in a time of incredible transformation, and it could be positive transformation. Everything's not negative about this, right? Getting to have, you know, a much more serious, much more society-wide racial justice conversation is ultimately very positive as a development. But the point is, there's a huge realignment, a resetting, a reimagining underway. So this doesn't happen that often, that everything's sort of up in the air and we can, you know, really reform opinions about what do we think about things and who are we aligned with. So it's an incredible time to be thinking about things and to get to shape communications and conversation. And that's really what I would tell you all, is that in times like this, communication plays a focusing role, a reassuring role that we are strong enough to, you know, use this to our positive advantage, and motivating. Folks do want to know in times like these, what are they supposed to do? And so, you know, as your role in society as leaders, you know, it is a time to use communication to be motivating. So let's talk through how to do this though in a way that is actually strategic for you and not tone deaf into the moment. So let's take a look at the next slide. And the 4 things that I really want y'all to be keeping in mind when you're in a big change dynamic. First is perception, and this is just us really thinking about, what do people think they know? Keeping in mind that this is changing right now on a daily basis. And in a time of great disinformation, as well as polarization, what people think they know may not be as rational as you'd like it to be. The second is this issue of trust. So trust in general has been going down across the board. People don't really trust government. They don't really trust the media. They kind of trust their peers. They don't trust corporations. Sometimes they trust, you know, doctors. So, you know, what's happening with trust is a big thing. So you have to think about yourself in this moment, and are you a trustworthy person or a trustworthy organization? How to build trust. We'll talk about that. Third is loss, and this is just a big thing. So people really do have loss aversion. They don't like to lose things. When there's big change, people will overly focus on what they're going to lose. That's just something you can anticipate. You can navigate through it in a very positive way. If you've ever tried to change your organization, you've run into this. And if you ignore it, it can actually sink what you're trying to do. Loss is a very big thing. And last is imagination. And I like to say that imagination is great because both you can imagine possibilities or you can imagine mayhem. So for any of you who have read The Hunger Games, you know that humans have great imagination for complete mayhem. So imagination can be harnessed as an unbelievable thing. But we do need to make sure it stays positive. Otherwise, it can move us really into being scared and fearful. So let's dig into each one of these, and then we'll talk about how to apply them in a communication setting. So next slide. So first up, I want to talk about this idea of perception and a couple of key elements around perception. First is, are people really thinking about things from a scarcity or an abundance mindset? So a lot of times how people think about things is that it's scarce. There's too little of it, and then I have to hoard it. And for those of you who are like, I'm not sure what you're talking about, I have two words for you: toilet paper. So we just saw how this happened, where people were so nervous about toilet paper that we had to go and hoard it. And so people get into a scarcity mindset. And they act in very predictable ways if they're there. There are also people, though, who actually kind of look at things with silver linings, right? Like, well, what does this mean that we can do right now? And so, it's not just what door just shut, but what window opened, right? So some people are coming at it from an abundance standpoint, and you need to know as you're talking to people where they are, because it will really matter for your communication. The second is people have a different sense about the future. They dread it, or they look forward to it. And so sometimes people feel like the future's coming at them, like they don't necessarily really want this. I have a husband who does not like technology of any kind, so it always feels like the future is happening to him, and it will require a password. But for a number of people, of course, they look forward to the future. They feel like they're walking towards it. They look forward to it. And that's a really different thing. So how do you get people to kind of look forward to the future? Is important. And then the last thing is this idea of agency, which is, of course, at times like these, we actually want people to be doing specific things. So agency basically means you feel like you can do something about it. And so in general, you want to try and figure out communication so that you are putting people into an abundance mindset, that they're thinking about, that, oh, look, there's lots we could do here, that it's something to look forward to, and it's something that they can do something about. And I love this guy, Tim. I see that Hannah also joins me in the chat board and liking Tim. So Tim is the security guard of the Cowboy Museum. Now, as you can imagine, the Cowboy Museum was not the most popular museum to start with, but then of course, COVID shut it down. And some people might've been like, oh, that's it. We'll just shut it down. We'll reopen it when we can. But they actually decided to hand over their social media to their security guy. So Tim gets on and he tweets daily, several times actually. He's very popular, and you can sort of see that he even signs his tweets, so he's new at this, but this is sort of the point, is that they actually looked around and said, hey, what do we have to work with here? So they looked at abundantly, hey, we have lots of stuff, what do we have to work with? And they actually found their security guy, who has been an incredible spokesperson for them. Would have never happened, right, without COVID being shut down necessarily. And really making people feel like there's things that they can do here. And so just to give you an idea, that right now they have about 350,000 followers, and that's up 250,000 from before COVID. So this is the kind of thing where you can lean into people's perception in really positive ways and help to shape it. So let's take a look at the next one. So the second thing that we really need to be paying attention to is trust. And here we're seeing Audubon connecting to this idea of an inclusive outdoors. And trust is super important, because right now is a time of great meaning making, right? We're trying to figure out, what does this mean? What does this mean for us? What does this mean for our world? What does it mean for me? So it really matters, like, who gets to tell you what this means. And people look at this as to who that they can trust. And you, both as a person and as an organization, if you want to be communicating in these times, it's really a time for deep reflection about your place in the world. Keeping in mind that trust, everybody says it's earned, it's not, right? You don't actually, you just get given trust, but you can break it. So I want you to think about it like I'm in Bozeman, Montana, and if I went downtown and I started Kristen's fishing shop, and wanted to sit around and talk about fish all day, for the most part, people would trust that my name was Kristen and I was starting a fishing shop and I wanted to start and talk about it all day. And they might come by, and if I was in there and had a name tag that said Kristen and talked about fish, they would totally trust me on that topic, and that was exactly what I meant to do. If they came in, however, and I was doing something completely different, or my name wasn't Kristen, like that would be, I would start to break trust. So I want you to think about that generally you're given trust based on kind of what you've set yourself up to do. But if in fact what you're trying to do is to kind of go into a new situation or engage with a new audience or get into a new lane, then you really have to think about, well, how much trust do I have with those people? And what do I have trust with them on? So if we look at this Audubon example, Audubon has obviously enormous trust with birders. They're known to be good bird people. They have an environmental group that's been around for a very long time. They don't necessarily have a huge track record on the inclusive outdoors, right? Like if you go and look at a lot of their communication up till now, it probably hasn't had a ton of this. So if you're a person who's like, I need to be building more trust in certain areas, then first of all, it's important to talk about your intention. And so really what we're seeing here is, one of their people stepping out and saying like, why she thinks that, we need to be building a truly inclusive outdoors. And so she's letting you know who she is, where she comes from. Another thing that you can do sometimes if you're a leader who maybe is stepping out more on something is to actually offer an epiphany. Like tell people what your personal transformation or your personal journey has been, where you suddenly realize like, hey, we may not have been talking a lot about inclusivity as part of the outdoors because we didn't think about it a lot, but I heard this story or I had this experience. And actually share people like what happened that you actually shifted your mind on it. Again, what this is all building towards is a word that I think is pretty overused, which is this idea of authenticity. So how do you have authenticity, especially when you're having to step into spaces you haven't necessarily been explicit about before? And I will say I am sitting in a lot of board meetings right now where people are having to come up with, new policies, new practices. And it can be hard, right? You have really different people. Some people who are really there, they're super comfortable. Other people who aren't as comfortable. These are some really tense conversations. So I think, first of all, on the communication front, I do have people call me sometimes like, and they say, hey, we need to have this really serious race conversation in the next 3 hours because we need to get a statement out. And I think to myself, oh boy. So I think, make sure that you are doing the work that you need to do in your organizations before you start to communicate about it. Because again, what you do want to do is to be able to step out as an organization, feel really solid on the ground that you're on. And it may mean having conversations that you really haven't had before, or you haven't really gotten to a place where you are clear as an organization what you stand for. So again, here, Audubon has come out pretty strongly that they won't be neutral anymore, that neutrality is dangerous, as they're saying in this messaging in here. So that's very strong messaging, and probably was the result of a lot of conversations. So just want to really make sure that communicate when you're ready to communicate. Don't communicate too soon if you're not sure there's going to be different people from your organization are going to make it sound like you stand for different things. And don't try and force yourself on a timeline around a statement if you need to have some really important conversations internally. So I would just keep all of that in mind. So let's look at the next thing that I want y'all to focus on. So loss. So I mentioned loss as a super important concept. So this basically means anytime you have transformative change, it will mean loss of something, right? Like if you change how to do everything, and I just want you to imagine that if you came home and your partner who you love moved everything around in the kitchen, even that very simple thing, even if it was better organized, you would lament. You would feel like, I used to know where everything was, and you would feel a sense of loss. Now take that, times 10 or times 100, depending on what you might feel like you lost. And what we can almost always tell is when you tell people that things are going to be different, they will feel lost. So we've seen this for sure around everybody getting sent home from their offices. Like, for as much as everybody probably used to think, God, I wish I could work from home more, you're now realizing that maybe going to the office was good in some ways, and you're experiencing loss. So I think the thing that I would tell you to really consider is, A, there will always be that feeling of loss. So your job is to figure out why are they going to feel lost, and find ways either to mitigate it or to navigate around it. Even just allowing them to feel grief and acknowledge that you can grieve for it. I picked up this communication because I thought it was a good example of people getting it right. This is the idea around land banks, which is where they'll go and they'll buy property that might end up normally being in a foreclosure, might lead to blight. So this idea that land banks, can they get us out of this mess? And what's interesting is they start to talk about in their messaging, they say cities and counties that can marshal their vacant properties stand to avoid the permanent scars of the recession. So they're starting to really put out language there about we won't have permanent scars. So yes, this will be sad that we'll have to put these properties into a land trust, that people are losing their homes, that we're having this housing crisis, but this is a way that we can also use this to rebuild communities fairly to benefit disadvantaged groups and prevent the pandemic from exacerbating the social inequalities. So this is the kind of language that's taking into account that there will be this serious loss, but that this is a good solution. It's mitigating some of the feelings of loss. And that's the kind of thing that we want to be able to think about. Let's take a look at the last of the four here, and then we'll put them together. So I mentioned imagination. It's one of the most powerful human things we can do, is imagine what's possible in the future in front of us. And here we see Deanna Van Buren, who has a fantastic TED Talk if you've never seen it. She really talks about how to practice radical imagination. And one of the most important things, of course, is to actually figure out what questions can you ask to get people to think in an incredibly hopeful, optimistic, and positive fashion about the world. And so here she's showing us about what a world would look like without prisons. And so that's really important, instead of talking about what's a more humane prison, right, which would keep us in the constructs, which is that prisons had to exist at all. So, whether it's about, what would the world look like if every child got environmental education, for example, in your field? What are the really big questions that would get people to imagine a future that is so contagious, like they just want it so much, right? It's irresistible. And that's a really big part, because when you have to go through really hard things like transformation, which at the end of the day is a word that basically means through a lot of pressure or heat, is we want to know where we're going to. So really getting people to start to imagine what building back better would look like, or just building better, period, looks like, is a really important thing to be doing. So let's try and connect these ideas up and see how people are doing them. So on the next slide, some of the things that you all can do in this moment is, all of your stuff relates to one of these big things, right? It relates to the pandemic, it relates to the economic upheaval, it relates to racial justice, it relates to climate. It could relate to any of these or all of these. So I want you to be thinking about, how do you connect dots? How can you talk about things that you're doing that are important about helping us get to a better place? So here we started to see last week a lot of businesses actually started saying that they were going to make Election Day a paid day off. So this connects to the racial justice moment, in that they're saying they want to make sure that people have their voice, that this is one of the most important times that people have a voice is during elections. They recognize that a lot of their workers don't have paid time off to go. That's a barrier. They don't want there to be a barrier. So they're connecting their dots, which is what they as corporations can be doing to have a healthy democracy, and how they can make sure that we're able to pursue racial justice. And so you started to see a lot of these about time off for voting. So this is them connecting the dots between what's happening now and a solution, and that they're part of the solution. moving forward. Let's look at the next one, which is this idea of shaping narrative. So this is the piece that Judy sent to you. And it's a really important thing to remember almost any time that we change dramatically in society. And again, right now we're on a lot of fronts changing dramatically. And there's different narratives that are moving that you may or may not want to get involved in shaping, but it really matters which ones get shaped for what we do moving forward. So the first is what we'll call what happened. So what happened narratives, you're seeing it for sure right now around the pandemic. You're seeing it to some extent around racial justice, is this idea of us diagnosing what happened. And it's really important to think about what the diagnosis is, because it says, whose fault was it? What exactly happened? Whose fault was it? You know, who were the casualties of it? What problem are we solving for? And that's a really important thing to understand is, you know, what problem are we solving for? And it can have everything from, you know, what did this expose about education? What happened? Like, what is it about schools that suddenly, like, we see broadband moving right now in a massive way because people are saying, wow, we had no idea that people needed the internet in order to, like, do a lot of things. And a lot of kids can't be at school right now because they don't actually have the broadband to get online now that all schools are online. So really interesting is what happened is this diagnosis. The second is what now? And this is the short term. Like, so what should we do about it right now? Like right now, what should we do about it? And this is a good example of people putting forward to free the vaccine. So what they're trying to say is, hey, this shouldn't be a big market thing. This should not be somebody's making a ton of money off of it. It should be part of an open source, publicly funded, you know, everybody's going to get it, free the vaccine. So they're trying to seed that with us as success as we get to a vaccine. And then last is this idea of what's next. And this is the hardest one, is to say, so what are we going to do after this? And this is longer term. And what you're really trying to do is to give space for exploration. You want people to sort of see that, well, we don't want to be back here. Like, this wasn't a good place. Like, this got us exactly the results it was set up to get. So when people talk about, let's go back to normal, like, maybe let's not go back to normal. Let's get to better. So what is next? And a lot of the messaging around what's next is going to be questions, honestly. So the question, you know, you need to ask to your communities so that they can think about, in the next 10, 20 years, you know, where do we want to be and what does that mean for us? So right now, all of these narratives are in play. Nobody exactly has pinned down what happened, although we see people trying to say in the pandemic that, you know, maybe it was China's fault. And if that sort of xenophobic story takes hold, then the solution's going to be really different. And then if a different story takes hold about our inability to plan and that we didn't act collectively, and if that one takes hold, then not only does that mean something different for the pandemic, it means something different for, say, climate, right? Is like, now suddenly we might actually value planning more as a society than we did in the past. So these narratives are all in play right now. They'll be in play again around the elections, right? No matter what the outcomes are, people are going to want to know what happened, what now, what next. So these are in play a lot right now. Let's go look at the next slide. So as you think about your communication right now, I will say I encourage everybody to think about emotional range. When you find all of your communication is the exact same emotion, whatever that might be, it's probably pretty boring. It's probably wearing on people. So I want to really think about what are some of the different emotions that we can use. I pulled this piece of art by Marcus Ward because I thought it was so beautiful. For his frontline essential worker mom. But it just reminds us of like admiration, gratitude, that these are emotions that we want people to feel right now too. So really thinking about what emotions you want people to be feeling that helps them be motivated for what you want them to do. Let's take a look at the next slide. So a few more here. One is this idea of signs and symbols. I've really realized how important these are. I think I underestimated them as a communicator. You know, people will talk about people first language, which means not to say homeless person, but a person experiencing homelessness. And we just saw the AP style book changed and has capitalized Black. And I think what's important to me about this, when I think about us sitting here in the middle of Pride Month, many of us probably just marked Juneteenth. Even as we think about Earth Day, that sort of happened, it was a big anniversary, but obviously it was in the middle of all of this. But I want to think about these signs and symbols are important because they're a time of focus. And I mentioned that communications helps to focus. So it might focus us on thinking about this issue like Pride Month does. It's also very symbolic. Like, I think that when you have to have a conversation about whether as an organization you're going to capitalize Black or not, you're having a conversation that's important, which is about, well, why is this an issue, and why might it not be right to call them African Americans, or why are we even thinking about this? It sparks important conversations for your organization, and to consider how your own language is maybe supporting or reinforcing either things you want or things you don't want. So I think these signs and symbols as communications really matter, and are important to be digging into. Let's take a look at the next one. So just moving a little bit into 3 different kind of messages I'd be getting pretty good at right now as organizations. The first is just straight up messages that reassure. Here you have the JED Foundation. They're offering language that they're using. They're telling people to not use social distancing, that they're really talking about physical distancing, and to really not make people feel more isolated or other things. So messages that reassure, like right now I can only imagine, like, for teachers, for educational outfits that know that they're going to go through massive change. Not only that this was massive change, but that this will change how everything happens. What do you need to be saying to people to reassure them that, yes, we can go through this, yes, we can change? Again, being mindful about not being tone deaf. I was reminded of this. There was an exchange, a pretty public exchange the other day about some people were like, we'll make it through it. And then there were people who were like, actually, some people won't make it through it. So really thinking about what you're saying in this time. But messages that reassure are pretty important. They're messages of strength, messages of resiliency, if that's appropriate. So there are times that you just need to reassure your community, reassure the people that you're trying to be communicating with. After that, though, you also probably need to be sending out some messages that clarify. So let's take a look at the next slide. So messages that clarify, I think right now are important. It might be that you're clarifying to your own internal staff, like how you're putting their health and safety first in response to the pandemic. I look at these colleges and universities that are trying to communicate that both they care about their students and also they want them back on campus. It sounds like for financial reasons. So, you're really having to clarify, like, what are your priorities? What's coming first? Why are you thinking about things in a certain way? And I thought this message from the Outdoor Collective was really good. It clarified them as far as where they stand around these issues of racial justice. And so they actually talk about it as reintroducing ourselves. So like they're resetting and they're letting folks know who they are and what they stand for. They're actually modeling that authenticity I was talking about. They're talking about who their founders are, where they come from, and that building a more inclusive and culturally diverse outdoor and travel industry is a core purpose of their business. And then they actually get pretty feisty there in the 3rd paragraph, where they're saying to people like, hey, and if your reaction to this is, keep race out of my outdoor inspiration or stick to sharing beautiful photos, you're welcome to go somewhere else. And I think this is a message that clarifies, right? It's really saying like who is part of their group, who they're there to serve, who they're not there to serve, what feedback they're taking, what feedback really they're not really going to be listening to anymore. So I think it's pretty important. I can imagine a lot of y'all are probably in messages that clarify right now. Again, don't rush these. You need to be really clear who you are as an organization before you make some of these, especially if you're stepping into some of this stuff for the first time. And then let's take a look at the last one, which is messages that motivate. So this is probably my favorite thing that's been going on during the pandemic. So this is Mayor Lightfoot. She's out of Chicago. She actually did very funny stuff, and we'll look at a video here in a second that I think really shows us all of these things in action and strategically used. So here you can see that she's obviously pretty big on her stay-at-home message. So let's take a look at the next slide, Judy, if we can get the video to go, and then we'll talk about what they're doing here. Is the sound coming across?
Attention. Stay home, save lives. Here's what's up. If I make this shot, you gotta stay home. She shoots, she scores. Debbie, getting your roots done is not essential. Your dog doesn't need to see its friends. You can work on your jump shot inside. Apologies to all the Aries, but if you stay at home now, maybe you can celebrate with the Geminis later.
All right, Judy, let's go click off of this and we'll talk about it. So to me, that's a really good use of a lot of the stuff I just talked about. She's really showing us why we can trust her, who she's putting first. She's using humor. For those of you who know, Mayor Lightfoot is actually not a very humorous person, so it was a real attention getter that she was sort of using a different emotion there. And she's really connecting it, not just stay home, but save lives. So she's making it very motivational to folks, really telling them what the consequences are. She's doing this in a pretty simple way, as you can see. So she kept running these on Twitter. It got a lot of attention. But I think it shows a lot of what I'm talking about of if you're going to be communicating in times like these, that's a really good example of, I think, doing it well, keeping in mind all of the stuff that we're talking about. So let's pause there. Yes, we will share the link to the video.
Thank you, Kristen. We do have some questions. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So Sarah asked, how should organizations think about responding to the critique of our communications around racial justice? Is it important to engage thoughtfully, or should our statements stand on our own? How do we think about responding to social media?
So let's have her come off of mute so we can have a conversation about this. Yes. So tell me more what's going on in your situation. It sounds like maybe you issued something and you're getting feedback from your community.
So Sarah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I work with a lot of our affiliate organizations, and so everyone has been spending time crafting statements, just as you talked about. Mm-hmm. And it's rare, but sometimes you will get sort of public pushback on Facebook, to the statement. And I just think that we all, even in our personal lives, are trying to carefully balance how much time and energy do you spend responding, or is it really just that you should just reiterate your position rather than kind of be responsible for a dialogue?
Yeah. Well, I think it really matters, do you need to be in relationship with those people? So we saw with the Outdoor Collective that they were sort of saying, like, if you want to have a conversation with them about how to have an inclusive outdoors, they're going to engage with you. But if you're sort of there to be like, hey, I don't think race even belongs here, they're probably not. So I think, first of all, you have to sort of say, who are you responding to, and who are you just saying, I clarified where I stand on that. So, but if there are people you need to be in relationship with, I would just keep in mind, especially on conversations around racial justice, inclusion, that is going to be a conversation, that it is probably in getting feedback from people you're in relationship with, that even if you feel like that was my best statement at the time, that's not to say that somebody won't bring something up that you might still want to consider. It doesn't mean that you have to get in a big public conversation with them. A lot of times I think, listening to people, taking it offline, hearing from them, and then deciding like, oh, does this warrant us considering this for the future? is there something about this that we hadn't thought of before and we want to share, and then decide, and do we want to share it back publicly? Is there something that came up? So, you know, Lyft's gotten a lot of trouble when they first came out. They were sort of like, we're really concerned about racial justice. We're going to give a ton of money to Black-led organizations. And people were sort of like, thanks for the money. And like, what are you doing as a company? Because like you have, you know, you're a company, you have a board, you have an executive team, you have drivers, you have worker conditions, like you have a lot of work to do. So I think it's important that Lyft did need to obviously engage back into that conversation, right? They couldn't kind of ignore that. They needed to take that feedback from the community. So I think, you know, probably a good skill to train your affiliates, it sounds like, is actually to feel like they're in conversation with communities that are their constituents. And in that case, they need to hear, listen, they might want to ask questions before they immediately say something back. I think it's hard because I think, you know, you can feel pretty defensive. And I think there is a call out culture right now where you sort of feel like as a leader, if you step out, you know, that you could get called out. And the truth is you can. And sometimes maybe you should have been, and you need to be open to that. So I think that's, you know, just something to really consider. But again, if there are people that are just sort of trolls or people outside your community, I would not spend a lot of time on them. Like I think Outdoor Collective offers us a good role model there.
Thank you, Kristen, and thanks, Sarah. We had one other from Catherine Price, and Catherine, I'll open it up. And Catherine said, I think one thing that I'm struggling with is that the messaging around what to do now is so varied. In the South, it's pretty much a free-for-all, which makes it hard for organizations to know what to do and what message to put out. How do we communicate in a way that may go against what is coming out regarding public health guidelines? So I'm going to allow you to talk, Catherine, if you're on.
Yes, thank you so much, Judy. Yeah, so just to clarify, you know, from there, I think, you know, as things have been opening up, I think the communication has been more difficult. You know, when like the video you just showed, it was really clear cut, you know, stay home, here's the message. And that was really easy to communicate and to understand. And I think now that we're in this transition period, it's a little bit more nuanced. And so I was wondering, you know, how organizations should best communicate and engage in these ways.
And do you feel like you have a really specific perspective on it, like right now? And I don't know in which states or regions you're working in. Do you feel like we're in phase 2? These are best practices. We just want to keep letting people know we're in phase X. These are the best practices. Or are you like, yeah, we don't know what we want to be saying?
Yeah, and I think, you know, specifically, you know, we're in a situation where a county is doing one thing and the state's doing something else. So you can cross the county line and you're in, you know, totally different kind of ways to communicate. And so I think as we're thinking about, you know, programming for the fall, how do we bring that back or say, hey, we're still not going to be holding these in-person programs despite, you know, these phases saying that should be okay to do.
Yeah. So I think the best thing, Catherine, is to constantly explain yourself. So as educators, y'all will appreciate if I say, show your work, right? So you might even say like, look, I know it's different for the county, it's different for the state. Because we value X, this is how we're planning to operate now. So we plan to operate in a virtual environment because we care about X. And I think just if people sort of understand why you're making your decisions, it helps for a couple of reasons. One, it clarifies, which clarifying messaging really important right now. But secondly, I think it also keeps them from thinking that you're somehow polarized or partisan, right? Like you're picking weird sides or you're sort of making some big political statement you're not making. So again, by showing your work, you're taking it away from people to assume why you're doing something. So explain why you're doing something and then say what you're doing. So a lot of times we might just skip to the what we're doing and forget the why. But I would right now tell everybody, this is why we're making decisions. This is why we're prioritizing this. And this is even when we would consider, you know, changing that. Like, this is what we're keeping an eye on. So like I work with a lot of funders right now and we do a lot of in-person trainings. Like I would normally do this in person, which would be way more fun. You know, right now I have to constantly explain to the foundations why Spitfire isn't traveling right now, that we don't plan to travel through the end of the year, and that, you know, and why we're making that choice and what would make us change that. And there's this whole long laundry list of what would make us change that, from safe hotel rooms, safe flights that the people can get on there. And I also sort of remind them why they don't want to rush this, which is you don't want to fund or mandate that makes somebody feel unsafe and unhealthy. And so that sort of helps them understand where I'm coming from, and also feel like I'm sort of looking out for them as well. So maybe that's a way for you to think about it.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Catherine and Kristen. Anne, any questions from your side? Keep going.
Sure. We have a question here from Jenny East. She's asking about the criteria you use to reflect on the timing of your messaging. So for example, at the start, at the stay-at-home orders, there was a big push by organizations to share online resources to parents, and parents feel overwhelmed. So do you have any thoughts about that? And I'm going to open it up for Jenny to comment in case she wants to add to that.
Yeah, Jenny, anything to give us a little more on that?
Yeah, just trying to think about being mindful of where people are at, like you've kind of talked about, but just thinking how we navigate when we send out messaging, if we're thinking about our audience and how receptive they are to that. So if you have criteria that you think about when you're like, is the timing right to say something in this moment?
Yeah. So in general, when I think about audiences, and I did this before I got on this phone call today, I literally write down what I think my audience is going through. So I think it's a great example with the parents, which is that there was a point at which all the parents got a ton of resources, but they were still like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, how do I actually plan my week? I have a ton of resources, but I don't actually know how to do a plan, right? And so now you might be able to say, I think where their need is this. So like I said, I think all the people I'm talking to today are drinking out of a fire hose. I need to give them some really concrete advice they can apply right away. I needed to make it a little bit light. That's why I added my Mercury is in retrograde, so trying to think about where your audience is, and write down as many things as you can think about. What do they need? What are they struggling with? What are they feeling? And therefore it can really help you think about what kind of communications is helpful, including no communication. So sometimes, I think that right now everybody's like, oh, I really have to communicate a lot. And that means both often as well as long communication. And I've had some groups that have been sending out some pretty short missives, and people are loving them for their quick, they're maybe witty, or they're just super caring. It makes them feel like they're top of mind, but also not like they have something else to do, which is to, read a really long email. So really thinking about what their bandwidth is for communicating. And sometimes, honestly, you just need a little rally cry, a little pep talk. So really try and read your audiences about where they are, what they might need to get them to do ultimately what you're thinking you need them to do. So again, sometimes we just need to really give them breathing space and room, because if they take that, then the next week they might be, or 2 weeks later, they might be willing to do something, rather than continually trying to just apologize profusely for asking them to do something else when they're so busy. I think be really careful about reinforcing stuff like that. I used to always hate that when people would be like, at the end of the day, they would say, I know I'm standing between you and cocktail hour. Like, don't ever say that about yourself. It's almost like you're saying, I'm not really that useful and you should really just be drinking. But I want you to really think about what would actually be super valuable to them. And if you're like, I don't know what would be super valuable, then keep thinking before you communicate, right? Don't communicate unless you're pretty sure it's valuable.
So Kristen, another question. This is so great. I don't know. Could talk to you for hours. I think this person left, but how can we help our audience be more in that imaginative mode as we think about the field of environmental education and thinking forward? What are some suggestions for all of us around communication?
Well, I'm going to reach out because there's a lot of you on here, and I was actually thinking this is where you all could help me. So I feel like I know we need to push people into imaginative space, but I don't know that we have great ways for doing it. So first of all, we have to get them. So I want y'all to think about it, because I know different people on this call have to get people to get intrigued about the outdoors, or you have to really make people get curious. So I want to think about that. So if you have ideas, I want to see them in the chat board. We can all talk about them together. But I'll lay out for you what you need to be able to do. So first you have to get them out of their fight or flight mode, right? So if we're down in the amygdala of our brain and we're trying to decide, are we going to take to the streets, you know, or are we going to get in the fetal position? We need to get them out of that. So we have to get them, first of all, into that more thinky part of our brain. And then we have to, I love what they're saying in the chat board. So people have to feel really safe. Like they have to feel like, I could just think these things out loud. It's why you have to say at the beginning of a brainstorm, there's no dumb ideas. I have to create this like space for them, an invitation, a welcoming, right? And I have to remove all the constraints. So when people say like, well, we'll never have the money for that, you know, or they'll never agree to that. Like I have to get rid of all of that. So I have to get rid of all the Eeyores, right? Oh no, Pooh, we can't do that, right? So I have to get rid of all those people. So I'm not entirely sure, but I will just say that if I don't have something to look forward to, I'm not necessarily going to do something really hard to get somewhere I don't know where I'm going. So I think this idea of getting people to imagine and offering them questions that they really do want to dig into, you know, but in a way that's not like, but, right? But is using the old yes and. So I think, you know, we could really use some help here, probably from educators who have a lot of experience getting kids to do this. But we have to get all of society to do it. So not easy.
Yeah.
I wish I had the exact answer.
And we were just on a call earlier with a woman who's working at the Brookings Institute about how do we change education itself, the systemic issues and barriers that are preventing all young people from getting an education. What are the questions we want to ask to change the system? And so anytime you say systemic, some people's eyes glaze over, like, how am I going to change a system that was, you know, that kind of thinking.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard to see, right? That's the thing is like when someone says to me, like, we should get rid of capitalism, like, sure, but I don't know what we're going to do. All we talk about is, well, socialism doesn't work. Communism doesn't work, la, 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 la. Like, and pretty soon all you're talking about is what's not going to work. So like, how do you have that conversation that leads to what's a completely different economic model than we have today, or what's a completely different education model than we have today? So you have to get people to see things that they can't currently see.
Yep. Anne, do you want to ask one more? I see Matthew has a question.
Sure. Yes, one did just come from Matthew, who asks, what are some ways that you measure how effective or positive your responses are to your communications? How do you measure that?
Yeah. Well, in general, I'm a very goal-oriented person. So I almost always have goals that are set up and I'm saying, am I achieving those goals? When I look at these messages that I suggested to you all to think about, reassuring communication should have people asking you less things you should have already told them. So for example, you know, when my staff's asking me a lot, like, are we coming back in September? Are we coming back in September? It says to me, I'm not doing enough reassuring communication. I'm not letting them know that they'll choose when they're ready to come back to an office, that they'll actually make their own choice based on health and safety. But when they keep asking me that question, it suggests that either I haven't gotten it to them enough or they don't believe me, in which case, in either one of those I can solve. So in reassuring communication, I might start to look for, if people quit asking me those kinds of questions, it would tell me that my reassuring communication is working within the communities I'm going to. Within the clarifying, I am looking for people to repeat it. So like going back and looking at that Audubon example, like if people start to say, oh yeah, Audubon's really for inclusive outdoors, that would really matter. So I want to be seeing that, you know, in the case of Audubon, because they're pretty big, I'm going to want to see it on social. I'll probably see it in news coverage. I'll probably get feedback from members about it. And it could be good and bad feedback. Like there could be people who are upset about it, but the point is people know about it. So I'm probably paying attention to measurements along those lines. And then motivation, of course, it really matters what I'm asking them to do and if they're doing it or not. Those are the easiest to track just because you can kind of tell if the actions are happening or not. So reassure is probably the hardest one to know that you've actually reassured people, but you can almost tell it just by what people aren't asking you. So it's a little bit of a negative measure.
So Kristen, thank you so much. I want to give you one chance to say any final thoughts before we go into the closing. But thank you so much for all these words of wisdom for us and just all you've done for our field. I cannot thank you enough. But any final thoughts for the audience?
I would just say, I love this group. I think y'all are so important. I know I told y'all on the last webinar how I thought you were a source of joy for all of us. So I hope that you play that role moving forward. But I would also say, I know sometimes it's scary to step out, that if you answer, you know what, it is valuable if we communicate, but I'm afraid I'm gonna get pushback. I would just tell you it's worth the risk. You'll get immediate feedback that will help you to actually have the position that you wanna have in society. So that's important. But I would just tell you, like, don't be so afraid of feedback that you're not communicating with many people who probably really wanna hear from you. So, use it judiciously, your communication, but don't be afraid to communicate just because you're not sure you're always saying the right thing. We don't really know until we communicate whether or not it hit or not. So take the risk. It's worth it.
Thank you so much, Kristen. And will you read all our social media posts before they go up? Just kidding.
Sure, just send them to me. I don't need sleep.
I'm going to turn it over to Anne to close us out, but thank you so much, Kristen, and thanks to everybody for joining. And Anne, take it away.
Sure. Kristen, did you want to say any few notes about these next 2 slides? We had 2 more slides left for you.
Oh, nope, those were just other examples that I didn't put in, but they're examples of just people connecting the dots.
Oh.
I did think that one was a funny one.
Right. Well, I just wanted to close the webinar today with just a couple of announcements. Just a reminder that everyone's going to get these fabulous slides, the chat notes, the links, the resources mentioned in the chat, as well as the recording. And if you ever want to peruse the growing wealth of information that's on our webinar series, you can go to EE Pro and go to that section, monthly webinar series. You'll see all of the archived recordings there. And if you want to get the recordings first, another way to do that is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So they'll go to our YouTube channel and then they'll get to our website. So that's a great place to just check out all of our previous recordings. And then lastly, just want to share 2 upcoming webinars that we've got coming up in July. One is about the circular economy, creating the world we want. 2 international experts, Pramod Kumar Sharma from the Foundation for Environmental Education and Bill Westcott from Brain Oxygen, is going to be breaking down what does that mean, the circular economy, and how can that help contribute to so many environmental issues we're facing today. And another exciting webinar coming up in July, save the date. It's going to be an exciting climate change education panel moderated by First Lady Tammy Murphy from the state of New Jersey. New Jersey is the first state to incorporate climate change education guidelines for K through 12 schools. And she's going to be talking about how they did that and what are some of the implications for schools in the state of New Jersey and what we can learn from them. So 2 really wonderful webinars coming up in July. More information coming soon. And that is all from us. Thanks again, Kristen, for a fabulous afternoon. And we hope to see everybody again soon on a future webinar. So take care, stay strong, and all those wonderful closings that you're all hearing right now. So take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.